OGP is still a relatively young organization. It's only 5 years old, but in that very short period of time, I think it's beginning to change the nature of the conversation globally around open government. OGP's main achievement to date over the last five years has been to engage over 66 countries in a domestic conversation, a local conversation about how to improve open government. And that takes the form of a vibrant dialogue between citizens and government about what would be the next ambitious steps, the next steps that would substantially open government in ways that involve citizens in the process and in ways that lead to better outcomes, especially for the poorest citizens. So that, I think, is the major achievement of OGP over the last 5 years. In doing so in such a wide range of countries, as well as enshrining those principles of equal government and civil society interaction within the steering committee of OGP at the highest levels of OGP, I think OGP is starting to change the nature of the global conversation to help the global conversation about open government essentially vault to an entirely new level. It's been able to scale and to synchronize that conversation and establish the essential nature of civil society government collaboration in a way that a smaller project building incrementally up in 1, 2, or 3 countries would not have been able to do. That's, I think, the big impact that OGP's had. And it's very visible at the London Summit and at the Mexico City Summit this week, where you have on one stage presidents, prime ministers, as well as civil society leaders together addressing the issues of open government in an open way, in a way that's open, establishes a critical dialogue. Now, at the core of OGP is the National Action Plan. And each National Action Plan that should be negotiated in an honest dialogue between citizens and government. Each National Action Plan consists of a set of commitments. And those commitments are intended to be ambitious commitments. They're intended to stretch practices in every country in a way that's congruent with the starting point of each country. So action plans are very different. They're meant to be different. They're meant to be flexible to country circumstances. Most countries have now had the chance to implement one action plan, some 2, and we're beginning to see some of the initial countries on their 3rd action plan. The best data that we have for these action plans comes from the independent reporting mechanism. And what that data tends to show is that 20 to 25% of the commitments that countries are making are what have been called starred or transformative commitments. These are commitments that really seek to make a substantial difference in open government in that country and have been successfully completed. So that's the starting point. Then we have approximately 15-20% of commitments where there's been very little progress. And another block in the middle of the remaining commitments, 60% or so, 50 to 60% of commitments, where there's more modest progress. So I think what we know in OGP over this period of time is that we're beginning to see the promise of the initiative in those 20% of the commitments that are ambitious and that are very well implemented. The priority for OGP going forward is really to see how we can ramp up this percentage of commitments that are ambitious and completed on time and well. That's, I think, the goal for OGP going forward. How do we go to that additional set of countries, that middle group of countries, and help them provide sufficient technical assistance, help them to substantially enhance the nature between civil society and government, enhance the nature of the commitments, and enhance the quality of their implementation. That's really, I think, the challenge for OGP going forward. Ultimately, OGP needs to be about people's lives, and it needs to show that multi-stakeholder engagement at a domestic level is the right way, an appropriate way to drive good, successful commitments, and through that drive changes or even revolutionize the way in which governments and civil society interact around progress in open government. So this is early days, this is 5 years in, and what we do know is, if you look at the Mexico summit, if you look at the summit in London, is there are 2,000, 3,000 people around the world who are beginning to engage in a substantial dialogue together about promoting open government and about making real changes through commitments to the lives of particularly the poorest citizens on the ground. It's a movement in the making, and that's what's exciting.